Good morning, good
Yeah.
afternoon, everyone, and welcome
Good
to
afternoon. Good
Switch
afternoon.
Asia webinar on promoting circular economy and sustainable consumption and production in technical textile sector. My name is Sangrod Srisawat Gaison. I'm the Sustainable Consumption and Production Advisor focusing on textile sector. This webinar is organized jointly by the Switch Asia SCP facility and the Asian Development Bank. Switch Asia is the EU's flagship program that promotes and supports countries in South, Southeast, and Central Asia to attain sustainable consumption and production in various sectors, including the textile sector. In doing so, the program assists countries to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 12 and other related goals. Before we start the session today, essential discussion, I'd like to invite Dr. Sinaida Fadiba, the team leader of Switch Asia SCP facility, to give us a few words and also to run us through the agenda today. Thank you, Sinaida, please.
Thank you very much, Sanroj. Colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, to this important webinar dedicated to SCP practices and circularity of technical textile. This webinar is done in collaboration with Asian Development Bank, and unfortunately, due to last moment extraordinary circumstances, Ms. Catherine today, representative of ADB, couldn't join us in real life, but she sent a greeting and in record, but also her assurance that ADB is interested and committed to the area and will continue to work with all of us on this in the future. Now, in the modern economy, there is a constantly growing demand for textile fibers. And as we know, it is not only for the apparel and fashion areas of application. According to the estimates of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the projection for global consumption of fiber will reach between 130 and 145 million metric tons by 2025. And to offset resource intensity and pollution associated with such development, and we do know that the textile sector is, in fact, one of the polluting or intensely polluting, to do that, offset the SCP and circular economy must be at the core of attention, and this is what our discussion today is dedicated to. Circular textile or circular fibers or circular textile economy refers to the production and consumption system where there is no waste, where fibers and other accompanying materials are put back into bio or technosphere to restore natural capital and or create secondary materials to feed back into production consumption cycle, either of textile or some other production consumption sectors. It is a system where products are also of much higher quality in order to last. European development is governed, as we know, by Green Deal, and it is offering a new economic development model aiming at transition towards climate neutral, environmentally sustainable, resource efficient, and resilient economy by 2050. Circular economy is certainly at the center of this work. And as part of new circular economy package, the European Commission presented an action plan for the circular economy, as well as many legislative proposals, including targets for waste management and recycling, including for textile, where separate collection for textile is to be established by 2025. More recent development, interestingly, targeting upstream part of supply chain of textile, focusing on prevention through design. Important development took place in March this year when the EU came up with a EU strategy for sustainable and circular textile, addressing the production and consumption in this area. It implements the commitments of the European Green Deal, the new Circular Economy Action Plan, and also the new industrial strategy. The Switch Asia program, on behalf of which I speak today, works with the area of textile in two aspects. First, it supports grant projects. There are 8 of them, either just finished their activity or in the process of implementation. And another is policy support work. And for example, the latest one is Cambodia Action Plan on Textile and Sustainable Consumption and Production. In addition to this, we are facilitating regional exchange and consultations, as well as contribution to the work of other organizations. Example would be consultation of OECD, where we really strongly argued for importance of SCP to be considered in the course of due diligence work in the textile sector. And this webinar is an example of some other regional webinars where the grant projects working in this area, 8 of them, were representatives of the technical assistance policy component working in the area of textile, are coming together to discuss and explore the ways of strengthening implementation of circular economy and SCP in the textile sector. Today, we count on exchange of ideas, the work that work in this direction, that would further help to assist this critical area based on your experience and your advice. Notably, this webinar, as I mentioned already, prepared in collaboration with ADB that sees this as an important area of development, and this collaboration is ongoing for a number of months now. We hope that it will take entirely new level in the next stage of policy component development from January next year. With this, let me once again welcome all of you and bring us to the quick run across the program today. You have a slide in front of you where the flow is clearly indicated. After this brief introduction and greeting from the colleagues of ADB, we will hear to the results of initial scoping study in the area of SCP, circular economy, and technical textile. Our experts and Roche will present you with this work. Then I will take a floor for about 5 minutes to give us common reference points for the discussions during the panel. With this introduction, we hope to have a common language to discuss what does it mean really, what components circular economy and textile sector has. We will then listen to the keynote address, which gives us a bit of a sense of what is happening in this area from the perspective of UNIDO. And then it would be the major part dedicated to the discussions of the critical factors which are impacting transformation of textile sector towards circularity from the perspective of particularly business sector. And this is why in the first panel we are focusing on the area of technology and business models. And you see that our speakers there would be really representing the business sector or entities closely working with the business sector. Panel 2 will address the second component, which is a policy framework, or rather enabling factors which help transformation of the sector. So the first panel focus on technology and business models, more private sector component or perspective, and second one, enabling factors. After this, we will finalize our discussion. You all are very welcome to raise your hand after each of the panel discussion or towards the end. That would be our short program for today. With this, once again, everybody is welcome, and the word now is going to our partner from ADB, Ms. Catherine Today, who is a principal specialist of ADB.
To welcome you with the EU Switch Asia SCP facility to today's webinar on promoting circular economy and sustainable consumption and production in the technical textile sector in Asia. We're facing today the double crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss. ADB's Strategy 2030 commits to tackling climate change, building climate and disaster resilience, and enhancing environmental sustainability through pollution control, resource efficiency, and natural capital management. But too often, sustainability is seen as a cost rather than an opportunity, and incentives are misaligned. Sustainable consumption and production needs to be at the heart of our economic development pathways, so that we develop new markets that design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. The majority of technical textiles are made in the Asia and Pacific region, and the market is expanding rapidly. Today's webinar follows on from an expert consultation to expand understanding of opportunities to transform this market into one that is circular. Speakers will share key initiatives in circular strategies, innovation and business models, and the policy and finance frameworks needed to scale up. I look forward to this conversation being the start of increased collaboration.
All right. Thank you, ADB, for the brief introductory remarks. And so next session, I will present an overview of the technical textiles, as Zinaida mentioned earlier. Technical textiles are in our lives every day. They are in home furniture, medical supplies, factories, sportwear, or agricultural activity. Globally, technical textile market is expanding rapidly. The global market size is expected to grow from 164 billion US dollars in 2020 to 222 billion by 2025, with an annual growth rate of about 6.2%. And Europe is the largest consumer of technical textile, followed by North America. Medical applications are one of the primary drivers of demand and consumption of these textiles in the European countries and Asia Pacific. And Asia Pacific is the largest producer of technical textile. However, textile sector in general, accounts for roughly 1/5 of the global industrial water pollution due to the use of chemicals, high energy intensity, greenhouse gases. These impacts are, as well as some on the social front, are less documented compared to the fashion industry. Recycling and disposal of technical textile are perceived to be difficult, so most are incinerated or sent to landfills. In response to these issues, the EU has issued a number of policies, directives, and strategies aimed to address the issues that come with the textile sector. To reverse this trend, and in an attempt for the world to keep the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius and reach the carbon neutrality by 2050, a transition to a circular economy and sustainable consumption and production is important and must be implemented across sectors, including the textile sector. So when we talk about technical textiles, we are referring to a variety of applications, where these textiles are used. From home textiles, these are like furniture, home furniture, to construction textile, clothing textile, protection, sport textiles, medical textile, transport, industrial textile, agricultural, geotextile, and environmental protection textile. So there are 10 to 12 different types of technical textiles, that we are referring to. And the primary materials used for technical textile are as follows. You can see on the slide, be they natural materials like cotton, like wool, or hemp or jute, synthetic material like polyester, aramid, carbon, and acrylic, and regenerated like viscose, rayon, and mineral glass, ceramic, asbestos, and also metal like silver, steel, gold. So while the governments, businesses, and civil societies globally have embraced the sustainability agenda and strive to attain carbon neutrality by the mid-century, in reality, global consumption and production pattern doesn't seem to lead toward that direction. Let's take, for example, the Circularity Gap Report in 2022, produced by the Circle Economy, said about 500 billion tons of virgin materials have been used over the past 6 years to make products and services that we are all rely on, but less than 10% are retrieved and fed back into the economy. In only 2 years, 2018 to 2020, global circularity dropped from 9.1% to 8.6%. And our take, make, waste economy consume about 100 billion tons of materials a year and waste over 90%, and the trend continue to grow. So as the circular economy puts it, when it comes to a circular economy, we are all developing countries. No country as yet satisfy the basic need of its citizens within the economic boundaries of the planet. Next, I would like to talk about the Sustainable Development Goal report. According to the 2022 Sustainable Development Goals report, domestic material consumption rose by more than 65% globally, amounting to 95.1 billion metric tons in 2019, and that translates to about 12.3 tons per person. About 70% of the global domestic material consumptions are in Asia, Europe, and North America, with East and Southeast Asia experiencing the steepest growth, from 31% in 2000 to 43% in 2019, so in 19 years. Renewable energy is growing in developing countries overall, but the poorest countries still lag behind, and fossil fuel subsidies remain alarmingly high, despite a temporary drop in 2020 due to COVID-19. Despite all that, there are some promising trends, in the textile sector, as I would like to highlight some of them here. In terms of circular strategy, and in energy and waste reduction, and substitution of fossil fuels with renewable energy are practiced by certain textile manufacturers. Some manufacturers have emphasized the recycling of textile and non-textile materials to create new products. In some home textile products, such as curtain, carpets, and rugs, contain regenerated materials. Recycled polyester and nylon are made from pre- and post-consumption or pre- or post-industrial waste, such as PET plastic bottles. And cotton has been regenerated to make new textile products. On your right-hand side, you see some of the groups or companies that also, that experiment, these new innovations idea to make this industry more circular. Okay, next we'll talk about innovations. Some companies have invested in a variety of innovative ideas. These include like eco-design, recycling technology, use of eco-friendly recyclable materials, or take-back program, resale, renting, repairing, improve product quality, all the way to like promoting low carbon lifestyles. And again, the box on the right shows the companies that are championing these ideas. As for the enabling conditions, as Zinaida mentioned earlier, the EU by far has been the most proactive in driving the sustainability agenda, and there are a number of EU strategies, policy, and regulations, as you can see on the left, that are issues, to address, this problem. There are also some education projects, as shown on the right, and also institutes, that are kind of championing or raising awareness of this issue, among key stakeholders. Okay, that concludes, the overview of this sector. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Renee Van Buckel from UNIDO to share with us some insights about the challenges, drivers, and trends, of this sector. Dr. Renee, please.
Thank you, Senrosh, and indeed for giving already quite a good overview of some of the challenges and opportunities. I was asked, and thank you also to the Switch Asia program and ADB for inviting UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, to be part of this. I'm trying to share my presentation. Can you just confirm that it's visible?
It is. Go ahead, Irene. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to speak a bit on the kind of what the circularity and sustainability innovations are, and sustainable in the technical textile sector. Even though I think that some of them are textiles and may still end up in apparel, so the differentiation is not always 100% clear. But I think that it's not moving. You can see it now. So sustainable production is, I think, the starting point. And from the UN side, UNIDO, but also together with UNEP, we have pushed this idea of resource efficient and clean production as our acronym. And that's basically saying that we want to, first of all, increase resource efficiency. So having more value out of the same kilograms of material, the same kilowatt hour of energy. And if we do that, then we have less waste left. So we reduce the generation of waste, effluent, and emissions. And then we improve then also the well-being of the employees and consumers and communities. So we get basically what we would say then this virtuous cycle. So it's self-nurturing. If you invest in resource efficient and clean production, we reduce the environmental impact and we enhance a productive workforce, which in turn then enhances productivity again. So in that regard, and that's also explains then the 6 icons which we have, we sort of emphasize then together with this resource efficient and clean production network, this increased resource productivity, which manifests itself in material productivity, water productivity, and energy productivity. So if I talk about water productivity, I would have like to get more jeans washed per kiloliter of water used. Or in energy productivity, I want more jeans manufactured with the same amount of kilowatt hours of energy. And then on the other side is decreasing pollution intensity in terms of the amount of waste per unit of product, the amount of wastewater, and the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So this concept then translates in different solutions which are out there and being shown on the screen. But these are essentially different angles by which one can find solutions for enterprises. So be it good housekeeping, operational measures, looking at the right inputs, making sure the processes are running efficiently, and then addressing shortcomings in equipment, looking for technology changes, then seeing whether there is opportunities for on-site reuse and recycling, or putting it into a useful byproduct, and also, of course, looking at the product modifications that might be possible. This can then be basically applied to the different components, the 6 components which I mentioned: water productivity, and energy productivity, and so on. And here you see some common water-related examples. I don't have the time to run through all of those, but it's quite straightforward. Let me just go to a few examples of businesses, which then also emphasizes the sort of the business case for that. So this is really linked to textile and garments in Indonesia, our resource efficient and clean production program. So you see 4 companies: a spinning mill, integrated mill, garment factory, and a garment laundry. And you see what is the kind of the reductions in the specific energy consumption, specific water consumption, and pollution load. and greenhouse gas emissions. It of course is not a universal picture because these are small companies to larger companies, but if the spinning mill is saving $47,000 up to this integrated mill saving over $1 million annually on the cost savings. So this can also already be big business to just focus on the efficient use of materials, energy and water, and then minimizing waste, effluents and emissions. The center in Sri Lanka, the Clean Production Center in Sri Lanka, focuses very much on chemicals management. They call this then sustainable management, monetary benefits, additional health, resource efficiency, and technology transfer, or smart chemicals management. And you see the kind of the average reductions of 40% chemical consumption can be reduced, energy 30%, waste 20%, and hazardous waste 40%. Reduction of industrial accidents, which is quite prominent, and water consumption. Then I take some example from India, focusing then on the energy side. So one is the sort of the renewable energy, where we're saying that many textile industries need hot water or steam at lower temperatures, and that can be provided by solar collectors like you see here. This is done at a smaller silk unit, but we are also trying to do this in the larger scale textile processing units. So parabolic collectors, so that you have a higher energy intensity. You can get up to 400 degrees centigrade with that, but you need in textiles only 130, 140 degrees. And then the next one is on the energy efficiency, where we are focusing on different clusters and looking at replicable technology solutions. So one is the textile sector, which is basically fabric dyeing in Surat, and you see 5 technologies. Investment costs are quite low. The specific energy savings are between 15 and 25%, and then payback times between 1 and 1.5 years. And then in Varanasi, that is a textile cluster that feeds into the carpet industry. There you see also some examples, also low investment cost and good returns on investment, even though a little bit longer, up to 2.5 years. So we see that this framework of resource efficient and clean production can be applied to different aspects and can then also contribute to the circular transition. So if we come to the circular transition, and this is also very much what we work together with Switch program on, is this kind of approach that we say resource efficient and clean production is essentially the middle strategy of achieving the circular economy. So the circular economy is, of course, the element of the circularity, so recycle perpetually, which is about the value recovery from all waste. But then in a perspective that this is not just a one-time recycling, so putting plastic bottles into textile garments, but then also looking at what we are then going to do with these textile garments when they become waste. So it's this perpetuality which ultimately is equivalent to circularity. And the resource efficiency is basically relentlessly practicing efficiency by some of the measures I just showed, which basically mean that we have less waste and less waste to recover. And then, of course, we can align this with a switch to renewable materials, renewables and renewable energy, because renewables can basically be cycled back into nature, provided that we do this at the pace of nature. And these strategies are then driving innovation, and I think that is a particular topic I'm particularly keen on. And we say that this is not an environmental nice to have or an environmental necessity, but this circularity, circular economy is basically a business need and an innovation opportunity. So just to show then some examples of what kind of innovations linked to technical textiles, this is Saatchi and Ahmedabad, a company that produces now sanitary pads made from waste banana fiber. So it's biodegradable and made from a renewable material. So that's a circular solution. Then the middle, you see manufacturing of natural biocolors by KB Coils Sciences, a company in just outside Pune. So they basically grow microbiological bacteria, basically, which produce these different colors and can then be used for home textiles, for example, because the bright colors are just not yet there, which could go in principle also to fashion. And then the third example I will mention is this is a very industrial application, but that is cypermethrin, which is an insecticide that can be co-extruded in the PE filament, so in the polyester filament from which insecticidal nets are being manufactured. This is a different, so the traditional insecticidal nets have the insecticide on the outside of the fabric, or on the outside of the fiber, sorry, to be precise. And then with contact, it can get off and it can contaminate this. And this is an innovation by HIL and the Central Institute for Plastics Engineering and Technology to actually put it inside the filament and then have a much longer effect. And this is done in the attempts to also have alternatives to DDT, which is still used for control of malaria and other vector-borne diseases. So these are just a few examples. I think the challenge, there's many examples around, and really the challenge is to scale up, to see that this is not just a few companies doing this as leading enterprises, but really done at large. And to my extent, there are kind of 5 main levers for doing this. And I put agency in the middle, which is basically referring to that the agency of the different actors around it. So it's the textile companies, it's the textile users, it's the brands, it's also the buyers, which have to take basically action on this. So getting it from awareness to understanding to action. And that, of course, is enabled by policies where we basically have to get regulations to stop the disposal of landfilling or incineration of textiles. So that will give a strong incentive to circularity. Then, of course, we need markets that articulate the demand, and we see there are a lot of efforts already happening with the voluntary sustainability standards like the zero discharge of harmful chemicals and others. Of course, technology is still a bit of a challenge. We might say that incremental innovations are out there, which I showed a few, but we don't yet have a vision on how textiles would look like by 2040. What technologies do we need to have them to achieve the challenges, the goals that we've already set? We've set zero carbon, zero waste, and water neutrality. But the technologies for that are not yet available. So we need to invest in the technologies that have prospects for achieving this. And then, of course, needless to say that the financing is also a challenge, but the finance can be unlocked once there's market policy and technology. So with that, I would like to wrap up. Here's a few of the websites or some of the materials that I was talking about, but I would be happy to take more questions and other comments as the discussion progresses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, René. And it is quite a good background for us to quickly summarize few of the concepts which you shared through examples, but in a little bit more concentrated form, because it is also quite well showing the idea behind our webinar today, and some of the points which you raised we will be following up in the course of particularly the second panel. I will take this opportunity to quiz you a little bit more on the questions of technology, innovation, etc. So colleagues, also my pleasure to welcome some of the newly joined colleagues also representing EU. With us is a program manager of Switch Asia, Alessandra. Very welcome. Good to have you with us. And we continue quickly with the summaries. Yes, naturally, we are speaking still about sustainable consumption and production, which has a long history, several decades of practices, and based on the 3 core objectives of decoupling environmental degradation from desired growth and prosperity. It is about applying lifestyle thinking, and it is also using this chance to assist countries in rapid development, so leapfrogging towards elimination of poverty, but not at the expense of the environment. Now, trying to scroll through the file and cannot. Technology does not collaborate. Let me do it manually, as we do. So the point which is second we need to emphasize is really about relations between circular economy and SCP conceptually. First of all, let us emphasize that both concepts has 3 major principles. And Renee, you put them forward already. So it's designing out waste. It is keeping product and materials in use, as you say, perpetual cycle. And it is rejuvenation of the natural ecosystem by relying more on renewable energy and materials, but safely and disturbingly returning them in the ecosystem. But there is a difference, of course, between SCP and circular economy. Circular economy is essentially the ultimate goal which we are aiming at, and SCP practices are the tools and means to achieve these goals. But again, the principles for talking about this remain the same. And what is very important, and this is the logic behind our common understanding within the Switch Asia ecosystem, hopefully growing understanding of what a circular economy is. Of course, it means different things to different people, but it has four core components, and Renee, you spoke about them somewhat. Now, interestingly, it also refers to your earlier work. So it is about circular strategies at the level of enterprises. It's about resource circularity, resource efficiency, and resource switch. Again, resource switch refers to substitute of a current input into production system to more renewable or less harmful. So it is certainly about innovation, because innovation is needed at the level of materials, at the level of business models, at the level of how we consume and what kind of lifestyle we will have in the future. So in order to enable the circular strategies at the level of enterprises and generally circular economy, it is certainly about innovation and circular strategy at all supply stages, from primary production and harvesting to processing, production, end of life fate of the product and materials, how essentially they are being returned in the production consumption system. And what you also have been speaking, and this is what our second panel today is going to pay attention, is on the enablers. This is about public policy, it's about markets. You very nicely brought forward the question of innovation in the areas which are required in order to bring forward those technologies and business practices which are not yet there and which are dramatically needed in order for us to move towards circular economy quickly enough. And of course, it is about education, it's about behavioral change. So all these four elements need to be considered when we are talking about this transition to or transformation towards a circular economy. So again, in all of our panels, we will be looking at these four dimensions, or rather the first panel will be more focusing on the dimension 1 and 2 and 3. And the second panel will be speaking about enabling factors as enabling for the first three elements of circular economy discussions. Thank you very much. So with this, I turn Sandrosh to you for introduction of the first panel, please.
Thank you, Sinaida, for and Renee also, for the comprehensive overview, about circular economy, sustainable consumption and production. So next, let's turn into the panel discussion. As you see from the agenda, there will be two panel discussion today. The first one will focus on critical factors in technological innovation and business approaches toward a sustainable and circular technical textiles industries. And we have a pleasure, I have a pleasure to introduce, our panelists today. The first panelist, Casper Nossent, who is commercial director of Daiku, the world's first supplier of commercial and industrial CO2 dyeing process for polyester fabric and yarn, which is 100% water and chemical free. Casper has over 15 years of experience in high-tech industry, technical printing and textile industry. The second panelist is Raquel Prado, Head of Research and Sustainability, Ananas Anam, which is a company that manufactures and sells Pinatex. The company is oriented to ethical and responsible business practices. Ananas Anam meets the challenges of our times by developing products in which commercial success is integrated with and promotes social and cultural development. And the third panelist, Venkat Kotamaraju, Director and Partner of Circular Apparel Innovative Solution, or CAIF. May I ask all three of you to turn on your camera as well? So our participants will. Thank you. So Vanguard is responsible for driving institutional building of CAIF to achieve its purpose of helping build a planet and people positive textiles and apparel industry across the global south. Okay, so with that, let us turn to the question that we would like to discuss today. I would like to ask our panelists, the first question, for them to share their insight. Where do you think we are in the technical textile industry in terms of moving toward a circular and sustainable textile sector? And what are the differences in practices of different segments, differences between home textile practices and those of geotextiles? So let's perhaps take this one by one. Where do you think we are in relation to the circular and sustainable textile sector? Who would like to offer your first opinion?
So, if no one talks, I can start. Good morning from here, good afternoon for you. It's a very wide question, so it depends. So there is lots of new technologies that are emerging in general, everyone is moving, especially because we have a common target and most of the companies are getting that on board slowly or faster. The new ones that has been set or has been founded on that mindset have it more integrated, but the big companies also are starting and they have more capacity to move to this circular economy because they have the resources. So that always helps. So I think that is moving, but there's still lots of work to do because it's not only what the companies are willing to do, it's also the adaptation of all the infrastructure. Some of them still not ready to be able to scale up, and so it's others are still not cost efficient because of that, because you need to scale up to be able to be cost efficient. So here we are also competing with price and still always you tend to buy the cheapest, or at least what it makes sense for your economy. So it's slow but growing.
Okay, thank you. So it is slow, but it is growing. And yet there's still a lack of infrastructure for scaling up. On that note, Venkat, do you have anything to add?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Sengroj, the Switch Asia team, and of course ADB team. Pleasure to be here. I think I just want to go back to the points that Renee and Zenaida were making, and I think those 4 pillars. Something that seems very apparent, but I think it needs to be surfaced, is that for us to connect the dots across technology, the markets, the policy, the education, behavior change, resource efficiency, and everything else. I think the first and foremost thing that needs to happen for us to make credible progress is for collaboration to happen. And the reason I'm emphasizing collaboration is because it addresses 3 asymmetries. So CAIF or IntelliCap that I'm representing, we are trying to build the ecosystem. And I think we're trying to address three asymmetries. First is language asymmetry. And I think Zineda was talking about it a little earlier, which is about how do we adopt a common language for us to be able to make the same or credible progress. And I'm making a very blanket statement, but this is largely true for not just the economies and the markets in the global south, but also in the global north. No two organizations can actually agree on a common understanding or a framework for circular economy. There's quite a few frameworks out there which get referred to quite a bit, but when you talk about how that framework can be adopted and practiced within a organization, that has been a significant challenge. And this is something that I'm playing back for my one-on-one conversations with a lot of brands and innovators and manufacturers themselves. The second asymmetry is the information asymmetry. And I think, Rachel, what you were referring to, which is we're progressing, but the progress has been fairly slow. And that's because when you see a few brands or manufacturers or corporates or retailers adopting technical textiles or any sustainable circular materials, so to say, or processes or solutions, the learnings from there tends to be very hidden within their own organizations, right? So the first thing that we need to try to do is how do we democratize learnings across the ecosystem? And I think that's largely true for even something like a technical textiles, simply because when you refer to cotton economy or when we refer to any of the conventional fibers and materials that are used, technical textiles have such a diverse application across different cross sectors, right? And that brings me to the point about the fundamental benefit, and I think something that doesn't get spoken enough across the industry is that when we imagine circular economy as an end goal, Zineda, as you were referring to, circular economy as that goal and the common goal that we could all move towards. One of the aspects in which we can achieve circularity is through byproduct synergies. And circular economy, if you want to attempt it even within a single industry like textiles and apparel, we can't work within the silos of the textiles and apparel industry itself, but look at how it cuts across agriculture, food, petrochemicals, medical and automobile applications as well. And I think, so that's really crucial. So that's the information asymmetry that I was talking about. And the third one is for any solution, innovation, material, any form of advocacy and education that needs to scale and sustain itself, we need to address the asymmetry between demand and supply. If you could look at fundamentally any challenge as to why circular economy has not been able to scale or become a mainstream stay in any business, any sector, anywhere in the world, you can eventually root it back to one common aspect of the unit pricing. Right? So I'll give you an example, not necessarily from a technical textiles only perspective, and I'll take a pause after this, is imagine, I think Rene was talking about one of the innovation examples that comes from banana waste. If you think about fibers that need to be created from the banana pseudostems, right? You need to address both the supply side and the demand side actors, which means on one side, you could design a program which looks at how do you create sustained livelihoods and improved livelihoods and new livelihoods for the farmers who, for largely, for most of the reasons or most of the time, after the harvest of the banana fruit, they don't have gainful employment. That's number one. Number two, in the whole value chain is the innovators who are able to convert that banana waste or that waste from that one particular stream into a fiber that can be adopted by the industry, brands or manufacturers, right? Which means if we need to make banana-based fiber a common mainstay and an alternative to conventional materials, then there needs to be a systematic investment into building that whole value chain, right? So three asymmetries that we need to address, and that will only come through collaboration. So one of the key factors that I believe needs to be put in place at a systemic level is for collaboration to happen. And this is not just between public and private sector players, but also between private. And the reason I do this is because when we were set up 5 years back or less than 5 years back, we said that if we want to achieve circularity as a mainstream business practice, any work we do, any program we conceptualize, any collaboration or any form of capital mobilization, organization mobilization, or education or advocacy, we need to answer two questions. And I think that's been the premise on which CIF works, which is, if I'm doing something, does it make circularity within reach for the value chain stakeholders? And second is, by doing something, by conceptualizing a program, am I de-risking their participation in the circular economy? And I think that's, when you look at the participants that are there in this particular conversation, most of us are playing the role of the enabler, be it as innovators, be it as multilaterals and bilaterals, be it as capital providers. And as enablers, we need to address those two questions. How can we make it easy for circularity to be reached by any of the value chain stakeholders? And two, how do we de-risk their participation? And one of the ways to do that is to bring collaboration and make those unusual collaborations happen. I'll take a pause here and happy to see any reflections from that.
Yeah, Steinroch, before you pass the baton to our panelists, I just wanted to mention that our panels are rather democratic, and our panelists across different panels are also encouraged, of course, to react and contribute. It goes to the panel 2, if you want to take the floor. It also has anybody in the room needs to raise a hand if any reaction is needed, because I do know that this kind of discussions also has been going on between Switch Asia program and UNIDO. So I know that, Renee, you might get a reaction. I also know that SEED program, where Arab, on behalf of each Arab, is going to have a word, also has certain view on this. So please don't be shy. I also see other colleagues from your UNIDO. Mark is with us. Mark, you're welcome. So please don't be shy. So at any point, please raise your hand and step in. Back to you, Steinroch.
Thank you, Sinaida, and thank you, Vanguard, for sharing your insight, about these three circles, if you will. It is very true. I mean, unless we work in collaboration, with our stakeholders, it is very difficult, to move this forward. I'd like to hear a little bit from the private sector viewpoint. Our panelist, Casper.
Yes.
Would you like to share your opinion about this question? Where are we, in terms of moving toward a circular textile sector?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so where are we? It's a good question, and it's a very difficult question to answer, of course. But if you to make it easy, I think you have to look at the different places in the value chain and also look at different markets. And if you look at the last part of the market, which is actually a consumer-based market, there we see that there are distinct differences in how far circularity can be driven as an economic model. And that has mainly to do with the products that we look at. What is the lifespan of the products? I think in the last session, we also talked about products that are quite immovable. So circularity is rather not of an interest there. Let's take geotextiles as an example. I think we used that the last time as well. And where it becomes really interesting to look at circularity is at fast-moving consumer goods like apparel, fashion, but even sports apparel becomes the same category, fast-moving goods. In that part, you see that circularity becomes a, let's say, mantra or doctrine in the industry. Is it really fulfilled? Well, I think on the material level, if you purely look at technology on the material level, we've come pretty far. If you look at polyester or cotton, those are fibers that are easily recyclable. So when you look at the total value chain and how does the model work, I think we there with the building blocks. We now need to scale it, but that is more of a economic discussion rather than a technical discussion. If you move a little bit further upstream in the value chain, you look at processing, that is basically a very condensed area because most fabrics are produced in the same mill. Using the same processes. You see the differentiation in business models on the consumer end. So that's where things are easy to collect or not easy to collect or easy to fit into a circular model. But if you look at the very, let's say, asset heavy production chain before that, there we see that circularity on material level is pretty much the standard. If you look at recycled polyester, or if you look at, for example, the cotton value chain, but I can more speak about polyester in this case, everything is geared towards using recycled polyester, get away from virgin polyester, which is good. But if you look at processing, there we still see a big gap. And that links a little bit to the comment made by Venkat. If you truly talk about circularity on a product level, what is your baseline? How do you compare the impact of your product? If you talk about circularity, it's very easy because you keep recirculating it, so the impact is assumed to be low. From a product point of view, that's true. Materials point of view, that's true. But if you look at the whole value chain before that, there is actually very little data available in the value chain to say whether you are truly sustainable or not. And that's a discussion we find ourselves in as DICO, but also with other partners we have to brands, but also our potential customers or even the players in the value chain. They have no references. So how do we measure that? And that is the point I think Venkat also tried to make, is we need to have a transparent way of measuring data in the value chain. We now have too many fragmentations, not only by associations that collect data like Higgs, but we have other standards as well. But there needs to be a transparent way to measure impact. And that starts from raw material all the way down to the basically the end of life of the product. And there we have a huge gap. That deficit is enormous, and there's a lot of lack of transparency, I would say, lack of baseline data, and especially if you want to have the true impact measured, you need to look into one step further before you go into selling to the consumer, that is in the production. That's where the biggest gap at the moment is in terms of circularity, and that has to do with clean processing.
Thank you. At this point, before I move to the next question, I'd like to invite, other participants or maybe, panelists from session 2, panel 2 as well. If you have anything else you would like to share, from your perspective. I noticed, from the list of participants here, I think there's a wide range of participants coming from different organizations and different sectors as well. Some, from Knowledge Institute, and some, I guess, government agencies as well. So, are there anyone would like to share further thoughts, about this question? Where are we, in terms of moving toward the circularity and sustainability in this sector? We heard from our panelists key challenges, in terms of the lack of ecosystem. There are kind of successes, here and there, and but in order to scale, we really need to have an ecosystem built. And also we heard that technology is quite there, but again, it's probably it's more of the economics of kind of moving this technology beyond just sporadic successes. So I saw Rene raise his hand.
And
Rene,
also Mr. Nakalin from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Cambodia. Mr. Nakalin, you're also very welcome. We worked with you rather closely on developing the roadmap for SCP and in the textile sector. So we have two hands from Mr. Nakalin and Rene, just scrolling through the line of participants.
Yes, Rene, you want to go first?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't want to capitalize the discussion too much, but I wanted to reflect a little bit on what Casper and Venkat were sort of highlighting, that there is no common language or no common understanding. So we don't have a firm idea of how circular and sustainable textiles looks like. If we say, let's say, where do we need to be in 2035 or 2040, and that is lacking progress or lagging pushing progress down. I do also at the same time feel that if we are still in a stage of experimentation with new technologies and innovation, so maybe it's okay that we have different approaches being pushed, and that different people are pushing different parts of the overall agenda, because it's quite diversified. We can talk about materials, we can talk about chemicals, we can talk about the product design and the business model. So So maybe we need just, as the Chinese saying go, let many flowers blossom and see where this time of experimentation and innovation will lead us ultimately in terms of getting to some kind of consensus on how textiles, garments, and technical textiles might look like in 10, 15 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. And our colleague from Cambodia, you still there?
Mr. Nakalin, the floor is yours.
Yes.
Hello?
My
The sound is breaking up.
Your sound is not coming through, Val. Some problem with the sound, Mr. Nakalin? Let's try again.
Okay. Maybe I can.
Yeah.
Try now. I think now it's better. Try now.
Can you hear?
Now we can. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to express my thanks for it. I would like to share during the drafting of the SCP roadmap for APIDA and also the initiation of the implementation of GP in APIDA and its collaboration. In the about it, including the pollution, especially water in the textile. We had a report from the participant from Ministry of Industry and Commerce that Lao PDR textile industry is a kind of the complete manufacturing industry, because we import the raw material as for example, we import the cotton fabric from outside. From the customer, we just try to complete it with the production to be the clothes and so on. For us, it's a kind of the very low pollution emission. It does aspect. If the situation is becoming like that, how that the circularity in cloud PDR. So this is a question mark. And second thing is we try to find out the research. Do you have any experience of this situation of the textile industry like cloud PDR, so we can learn from them that how to do the circularity, to put the circularity into the textile industry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, can I just quickly mention, Mr. Nakalin, first of all, sorry, I mentioned you represent Cambodia. Of course, it's Lao PDR. My deepest apology. So the sound was not entirely clear, but as I understood, your question was related to the fact that Lao PDR is kind of in the middle of the supply chain and primary production is not really strong there. So Was it the essence of your question? So what to do in this particular case?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
all right.
something like that.
Okay, sorry, because we heard about half of what you were saying. Colleagues, any quick advice on what the government can do in building the policy framework or facilitating the actions if the country is really working with not so much with the primary production of the fibers, but really more on the processing or receiving side in the area of technical textile in particular. So any quick reaction from the panelists from the panel 1 or 2?
Raquel raised her hand, and Casper.
So I think that the idea would be like promote the use of the less impactful fibers, so the government can help on also educating or showing the alternatives that are there, like encouraging the companies to change and to integrate, and also maybe with grants or like helping them to build that infrastructure to incorporate these new fibers, and building up also the education on how to work with these fibers. I mean, we work with pineapple leaf fibers, and we help the farmers at the beginning to start this new building business. Of course, they need help, like economic help, and they need to understand how to work on how to manipulate this new product. So even, and then when it goes to processing, also you need to adapt your infrastructure to this new product. It's not so different. It's still a fiber. It's a cellulosic fiber similar to cotton or linen. So it's something that it has similarity on industrial production, but it still needs a bit of adaptation. So the governments can help to that adaptation by economics, by education. I think that is a first point.
I have Casper and then Mr. Ding Chuang, who raised his hand earlier. Casper?
Okay, thank you. I think the challenge you face is because you're very heavy on the garmenting side. So what you lack is basically the yarn forward supply chain. And the example that you can look at is Vietnam. They face a similar problem. It's very garment heavy, and what they do is to try to attract the rest of the value chain. There's a couple of drivers to do that. One of the brands are pushing them to close the supply chain, yarn forward to garment. And the other one is tariffs. Import and export tariffs determine as well that you want to have a closed supply chain, yarn forward. So where you need to focus on is building a supply chain that becomes competitive, not only because of cost and for strategic reasons, but also from a sustainability point of view. And if you have a blank canvas where that whole industry is basically in deficit to the total output in garments you have, you need to focus on attracting foreign investments that build that supply chain for you. And there you need, as a government, to put some rules into place. Vietnam is doing that pretty nicely to an extent, but you can learn from it to do it better. And that is to focus on attracting clean processing, because that is the biggest impact you will have in your total value chain. The garmenting side is impactful for other reasons, but the whole supply chain coming with that is the most impactful one. Yarn production all the way down to dyeing and finishing of fabrics. If you set it up with the best standards available in the market and you push your foreign investors to close that gap, or even push your local industry to close that gap for you, using the latest technologies, you can build a very, very competitive supply chain in the textile industry competing on sustainability. And I think if you have the blank canvas, focus your policy on attracting the missing part of your value chain, which is also one of the most interesting ones to have from a technology point of view, and maybe also from a labor point of view and excellence point of view, but it's also the most polluting part. So focus there on attracting the clean part of the value chain with policy frameworks in place.
Okay, thank you. Now I have so many hands up. Ding Chuang, who raised his hand for a while now. Would you like to come in as well?
Thank you. Thank you for, could you hear my voice? Yeah.
Okay.
Could you hear my
yeah,
voice?
yeah,
Okay.
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me to join this panel discussion. I'm here just to want to share maybe a useful information for this discussion. As you know that I was very curious about the first questions, that is where we are in the technical textile stage, and as you know that I was working as an expert in ISO, so you know that ISO has now developing a series of standards to on the circular economy. That is developed by the ISO TC 323, and one of the standards mentioned here is I think the number is ISO 59020. The name of this standard maybe is just on the city stage as a circular economy measure and assessing the circularity. And as you know, if you want to access or knowing that where we are for the technical textile industry, so we should know that as Casper said, that we should know the baseline and we should know how to evaluate this.
Hello.
Some challenge?
Yeah, I think the internet signal.
For information for us to measure this for the circularity of the maybe technical industry for this. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ding. Sandrosh, my suggestion is not necessarily go to the second question because partially it's being addressed. So you can just go for discussion for a while. And then what I can simply do is introduce into the discussion the persons who are participating in the second panel to have a mega panel and put to all of us a number of questions.
I think we are also a little over our time. Would you like to perhaps morph into the second panel?
Sure.
Discuss,
You can just bring the slide. So what I will do while you're bringing a slide, I will quickly introduce the three panelists from the third panel, and then I would put a few questions to them. But then again, colleagues, please feel free, panelists from the first panel, to raise your hand and introduce your view and suggestions into this discussion. So we don't need to be too structural, so it kills the flow. So it is my pleasure with this to introduce our second panel discussion, which is focusing predominantly on the enabling factor, though the panelists from the first part now already are speaking quite a lot on the enabling conditions, including the policies, including ways of collaborating, including certain standards, including the need for data. So it is a very natural transition. So let us speak about all of it together. So in the first panelist for the panel 2 is Mr. Arab Habla, who is Executive Director of SEED. SEED is a company which is focusing on entrepreneurship, particularly among the small, medium-sized enterprises and certainly the micro enterprises. So Arab is my predecessor. So he's a former team leader of Switch Asia SCP facility, but there is no former in our world. So once team leader, always team leaders, like with professorship in some countries. So Arab, you are very welcome. The second panelist is René van Berkel, who already is part of this conversation. René is the head of the regional office of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization based in India, but this office is responsible for the work of the countries in South Asia. Mr. or Professor Ding Shuang, Assistant Professor, China National Institute of Standardization, and clearly we already heard also from him in this conversation quite a number of useful hints, which and some of the standards which would govern this sector towards more sustainable consumption production practices and eventually towards SCP. So colleagues, you are very welcome. And to start you all, Sandrosh, you can bring us to the overall view of all of the participants of this conversation, so we can stop sharing the slide. And my question to all of you to start with, what emerging trends you have noticed recently, trends towards sustainable consumption and production, or towards circular economy, in the area of particularly technical textile, but not necessarily specifically technical textile, because as was previously noticed, the gradation is rather blur. So it is really about areas of application in areas other than apparel, but textile could be the same, or textile fibers could be the same. So what's up? What kind of new enabling policies, instruments, technologies, innovation, difference of relations in supply chain? Again, we started this conversation, but what's new in your perspective? And can I invite Mr. Ding Shuang probably to share your ideas first? And my suggestion is for Sandrosh to stop sharing this slide and bring us all into the panel, so we can see, so to speak, all of the participants. And colleagues, if you want to make yourself visible, it's much nicer to see you than just your names. So, but up to you.
Mr. Ting Chuang has logged out, and he will connect again because his signal is not good.
All right. Okay. So let's, while we wait for him. So Ara Pranay. So the floor is with you.
Thank you. Good morning. Or good afternoon for you. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar, and I'm sorry I could not attend the first hour. I was on something else, but that is also relevant, even though it was focusing on sustainable buildings. Zineda, you said that at the end we can be talking about technical textile or textile in general. I think there is still a difference, even though certain things are common. The general textile we talk about is very much driven by the fashion and the quick consumption and the mass production and so on. The technical textile has a specificity that generally it's more resistant. It is not turning so quickly as normal fashion. And then when it comes to the principle you're referring to, yes, of course, we have to look at efficiency, waste management, and so on. And what's happening in the textile industry more and more, and the COVID has been, I would say, unfortunately or fortunately, a driver for that, is more innovation in how we produce the technical textile and how we use the disposed ones in terms of recycling, upcycling, remanufacturing, and so on. And you probably know a company, a travel company, Lufthansa, who has been very active on the upcycling issues of the element that they have in the plane. Of course, it's just a simple example. But there is much more that can be done in this sector in trying to innovate further in the whole process to have textiles that are more resistant and that can be recycled better. One of the weakness compared to the other general textile is that we don't know much about the circularity in sense of not only recycling, but upcycling, remanufacturing, and so on. And a lot can be done in the sector, mainly because the material is generally more solid than the normal textile we know. So there's a lot that can be done here in terms of resistance and resilience of the material. So a lot of innovation in this sector need to be induced. This is one thing. The second one, listening to the last 5 minutes of the discussion, there is a need for a more consistent policy framework, and I would say more in the procurement process, because this is something the textile, the technical textile that provides material mainly, I mean, a lot for hospitals, for the big transport companies, for schools and so on, that could be much better framed by public procurement policy that could give recognition, advantage, value added to the products that are greener, that from the innovation, from the design time, can really look at how they will be disposed, and those elements can be integrated in the procurement policy. And I think this is a bit missing in many countries. The EU is working a little bit more on that, but not enough. And the last one, I will stop here and we'll come later on other things, is about digitalization. I think digitalization, not only just at the level of the big companies, which of course they are doing it, but they might be slower because they are old, they cannot move very quickly. But at the level of small and medium enterprises, the small enterprises that are feeding in the supply chain, that can be extremely innovative if we support them more in the digitalization, because this will allow them to better use the resources, to have less material, that go to the landfill or recycle and so on. So digitalization for efficiency, would it be material efficiency itself or support material like water, energy and so on, is something that on which we have to work much more. And then this will have an impact not only on the quality of the textile, the technical textile, but also how this can be disposed later on.
Thank you very much, Arab. So the whole question about innovation of a small business in particular is extremely important, which, however, would need quite a number of actions to giving agency to the MSMEs. Let me come back on this point. So let us hold on to this. But with this, let me turn the floor for a while to Mr. Ding Shuang. I hope that your connection now is working well. Mr. Shuang, Dr. Shuang, so are you with us now?
Yes, Zanata, I'm here.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. So can I just turn the same question to you, slightly reframing it from the perspective of your field and your institute, which is working on standards for the sector. So where you see emerging trends towards circular economy, in addition to the standard of ISA, which you have already mentioned, 59020. So what else you think is emerging? What kind of data it requires? So where we are going and how we can take advantage of it?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to join this panel discussion. I think that the question is about the emerging trend in this sector. So I just prepared something for this. As you know that from the side of the standards, as you know that the policy is very important for you to build your own standards in this part. So always, you know that to develop new standards is also have very close link to the policy that you want to address. So as you know that we can see that the trend of the green manufacturers or for the textile sectors is the green development. And as you know that in Europe or also in another part of the world, you can see that the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality is the both goal from the world. So you can see that not only the I think the resources efficiencies but also the energy efficiency will be emphasized by this part. So so for textile sectors, you know, here we can see that the development standard for emphasizing the maybe to use of the renewable resources, renewable energy, that will be very important for the future. And another trend I think that is also in the circumstances we met, as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic we met with. So as you know that some kind of technical textile is increasing. For example, the medical textile is increasing very quickly as of the need for the medical use. So, but you know that I think the use of the disposal masks or something like that is also increasing very quickly. But this use of this is a very big question for us to deal with, because it's one is you know the mask is a disposal is used for only once. So this work can be a very lot of or big obstacle for you recycle this kind of that is low value, I think, materials. So this is just the challenge we were meeting, but it's also provide of us some opportunity to do this, to deal with it. Another one is also the trend we as Arab has talked about, is about the transition using the digital trend set. As you know that for recycling the textile waste, almost closed. I think that to form a closed loop is very important. So recycling, as always, think that the one of the best way to trade with the textile waste. So how to form the closed loop is also very important for us. So so how to use the combined with the digital ways, such as online offline method to broaden the channels to recycle the textile waste is also another trend in the future, I think. So in summary, I think that as you know how to level from the set of the standards, you know that the policy trend is also very important for us to, I think, to develop new standards. And otherwise, also the COVID-19 pandemic we met that have very big influence on the supply chain. Otherwise, all the digitalization is also have a very good effect for us to recycle and, for example, the textile waste. That's all. Thank you.
Dr. Shuang, can I offer a follow-up question? In all of the trends which you mentioned, particularly for quality and standards in the area of resource efficiency, or for calls to create the materials in a manner that it enables more cost-efficient recycling and return of the materials to the production consumption cycle. So where mostly these demands are coming from? Is it coming mostly from the side of the governments, or it is really trickling through the supply chains, through the markets? And if yes, which markets you feel are particularly strong in turning the textile sector towards more circular behavior? So where the pressures are coming from, you feel, from the perspective of standard and enforcement of these standards?
Thank you, Zanetta. Thank you for your question. And first of all, I think that is a stricter regulations from different part of the world. I think there were emphasis in environmental protections. Example for the textile industry, because as you know that the textile industry will have very sales consumer department. I think, for example, the wastewater and the use of a lot of energy. So one of the maybe the drivers for this is also the very more and more stricter the regulations from different part of the world. For example, in China, that environmental protection became a very good consensus in China. So this is one need from the government. Another one is that if you want to move this textile industry more secular, that is also there's also another part from the market. As you know that this is very natural that for you to recycling such as the PET bottles to make these clothes. That is as you know that from the market side, that if you use the recycled bottles, that is the cost will not be more than the for you to use the raw materials to build the to form the new clothes. So from this side, that if you could use the recycled bottle to make more clothes or textiles, that would be cost efficient. I think that. So this also their need for this part. But you know that there's need, market need, there's driven. So if there is no need for this kind of product, there was no very strong drivers for this for you to recycle some such as for as I mentioned before, as you know that some low value or one-time used or disposal materials that is not easy to recycle. This is more part make more pressures from the government part. So how to find a new way to add more values into the supply chain that can make more maybe high value recycled products that will be more important in the future, I think. Thank you, Tanada.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shuang. And colleagues, I'm going to turn the floor now to René, but before I do it, I have a question which I would like all of us to share some thoughts about. And the question is simple but difficult. In a new textile, EU textile policy coming on, in your experience, is it something which is seen as potentially influential factor which would have an effect on the production and supply chains in Asia or Europe-Asia, or it is something which is not really yet talked about? So I throw this question about impact of or potential impact on the behavior within the technical textile sector to all of us now. But while we are also having it in mind, René, I turned a similar question to you, similar to about emerging trends, but I will turn it a little bit around and reframe it, putting it in a way. So do you see that different enabling factor for circular economy or for sustainable consumption and production play differently in various application areas of technical textile? So are there areas which are playing in the area of technical textile different from the one which is going in home textile to the geotextile, etc., etc.? So what is your observation?
Yeah, thank you very much, and quite challenging questions. But let me also come back on the earlier point, because you also asked what's kind of new trends, and I think the agenda has broadened, I believe, on textiles, and that is where we have always been concerned about water and chemicals and energy to some extent. I think that what has been added in the last 2 or maybe 4 years or so is the concern profoundly about microplastics and the contribution of textiles to microplastics and marine litter and so on. And I think the second point that has sort of hit hard is the sort of recognition of the relevance of textiles in a broad sense to climate change. So that textiles and fashion is bigger than the airline industry in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So these factors have really hit the sector, or hit the image of the sector quite profoundly in recent years. Then I come back a bit to what also Arab was referring to, that there is a profound difference. The fashion is all of us fast, and is dispersed demand, is everybody of us buying a shirt or a pair of pants and making decisions, versus the technical textiles, which is more driven by performance and driven by expert assessment on what performance actually is. But then I come a bit to your question on how does it work out for different subsectors, and it's clear that some of the subsectors are very much in the environment arena. So I just take Patagonia as outdoor goods manufacturers and the performance wear. They've been always had their business case around the environment agenda, and they have been the leaders on some of the circularity initiatives. So I think that there are some brands and some segments, particularly in the outdoor sports performance area, which can really lead by example. And I think to a certain extent that's also where Casper and Dyco are initiating first, is on the sportswear with polyester, with the supercritical carbon dioxide dyeing. So these are certainly there. And then I think other sectors are really, sorry to use a negative word, but really bogged down by performance specifications. And it's all clear that in geotextiles, if I speak about that as a Dutch person living in coming from a land that's under the sea level, we are very concerned that if you use geotextiles, that this dike is going to hold. Even if the storm comes or sea levels rises. So we are much less open to consider any other considerations in that regard. So I guess it's there, so to go. But I guess the one point I want to echo in terms of markets, then we have very clearly the government and public procurement of works, which are so important for geotextiles and for concrete, for building textiles. That there it can be a bit the same of also what we're saying with cement and steel. There's such a large share is government procurement. So if we can mobilize it, then it can not just be sustainable public procurement of what's already in the marketplace, but it can also be sustainable public procurement to guarantee new innovations or to mobilize investments into new innovations. I hope that's kind of useful. I think a few others were also referring on the sort of the big trends and which are affecting this sustainability, circularity in the textile sector. And I think you need to look a little bit at this from a manufacturing perspective at large, and then we come with three big trends. And the one is the reset of global value chain. So the bringing manufacturing and development and innovation more closely together and sourcing from multiple locations. So I think that for the textile industry in Asia Pacific opens opportunities. So new businesses could be there. And there's of course the green agenda, which we are talking about. And then there's the digital transformation. And I agree with Professor Huang that digitalization is providing new opportunities. And I think it provides new opportunities in two areas. I think that with the digitalization, people can look very deep into supply chains. And where in the past you could get away and say, I really don't know where this piece of fiber was manufactured or where this cotton was grown. I think with the new digital technologies that are fully deployed, you can even find the farmer and the name of his kids and all the circumstances under which it's been grown, and you can see where it's being manufactured, what chemicals are being used. So this will give a huge, much greater potential and much less to hide for some of the manufacturers and the brands and the value chains to do that. But I also believe, and I think that was also highlighted, that the digitalization offers opportunity for further process optimization. We see that if we apply IoT devices in textile sector, we can achieve much better dyeing results, much better, much lower energy use, much lower chemicals use. So clearly there's an opportunity to unlock. But we should get away with thinking that digitalization and just online e-commerce and e-business processes. It's about bringing these digital technologies into the manufacturing processes. but that requires a level of innovation, but maybe that's something that we could discuss a bit later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, René. And of course, the point about deep look into supply chain and data for that is referring back to the point which Venkat was making earlier about the need for particular baselines and information within the supply chain, but also potentially within the companies, as you rightly emphasized, isn't it? So, René, I also will take quickly this opportunity to follow on my promise to probe you additionally on the issue of innovation. Very briefly, where are the important leveraging points for innovation towards circular economy, in your view?
I mean, it's of course different sectors, but if you talk textiles, it's really about the fiber raw material. So what we use, and there's a lot of opportunities. I mentioned banana waste fiber, pineapple fiber was mentioned, the bamboo. So we have a much more diversification of the fibers, and then also the recycled fibers on how they can be utilized. So I think around the basic materials, which the fiber materials is an opportunity area. Then I think the whole textile chemistry is something where innovation can take place, and where the concept of green chemistry could be applied to how do we dye, and the supercritical carbon dioxide dyeing is one example, but there are also other examples of how we can do this, and maybe we could also say 3D printing of garments, of textiles is also quite within reach to do that, and it's actually being done on a limited scale. And then I think so the textile chemistry, and then ultimately it's also on the product designs and how we then design the product use systems and the consumption systems in connection also with getting the fiber recovery back. And then at the fiber recovery stage, I think the main challenge is still to deal with the many complex materials which we have, which are basically cotton polyester blends or nylon in there, and this makes it much more complicated rather than if you have one fiber. And this similar problem we have with the plastics and with other materials, that as soon as it gets complex, we have a huge challenge on the innovation side. I guess that and to a certain extent, Venkat was also referring to that. We're missing a bit of the innovation ecosystem for this, and you need just to take 30-second plug. We've been looking at a kind of system of innovation, how this works in India, and particularly in the textile and garment industry, and it's very fragmented. So there's hardly any collaboration or meaningful interaction or joint research between knowledge-based institutions, the used companies, the manufacturers, and then government and others. So that is a kind of the traditional, what is known as, some of the people might say, the triple helix, but also the components, the enablers of the arbitrageurs in this system, which is basically technical institutions and also financial institutions. So there is some merit to make to say that we actually need to look at how we do innovation. We have to innovate in the innovation processes in order to get the breakthrough technologies which will help us to solve or to get to what we currently cannot solve, and that's zero carbon, zero water, and nature positive textile and garment sector. Thank you.
So before I turn the floor up to you on some specific questions overall of MSMEs and SMEs in this ecosystem which we are talking about, so I can see Casper and Venkat holding their hands for brief reaction, please, colleagues. Well, Casper, please go ahead first.
Yeah, just a small add-on, not only for SMEs, but I think the industry at large. I think if you talk about a challenge in actually getting things implemented, the biggest challenge is how do you value sustainability, and how is that basically worked into the cost of products, and how willing are people to pay more for a sustainable product. A lot of the ingredients are there, I think the ecosystems are there, but to get the ecosystem to work, you need to compete with a system that has been optimized and basically get what's the lowest cost point for decades, and now you come up with a new system, new value chains, new products that are inherently more expensive, technologies are more expensive, capital expenditures downstream are extremely high compared to conventional production processes. So how is that factored in? And that is at the moment the biggest challenge that we face as an industry. Nobody is really willing to absorb all that cost, and if you look further down the value chain on product level and then consumer level, Also the behavior of the consumer. Are they willing to pay a fair value for a product that factors in all the sustainability components? Do we value sustainability in all cost aspects, or do we just market it as a greenwashing method, which is now illegal, but it's still a matter of cost, and how do you pay for this? That's the biggest thing.
How about institutional consumers, bigger companies, the public sector? So do you see them as playing fair game in this area? Paying the fair price, or it is still a bit race to the bottom?
Let's be fair, nobody is paying a fair price. Because if you really factor in all the true cost of sustainability from fiber production, whether that is natural fibers or synthetic fibers, all the way down to the end user, whether that is an institute, a government, or a big corporate brand, nobody pays the fair value. Because in the end, everybody looks at their own margins, and the true investments need to be made so far downstream that the consumer doesn't even see it. And that consumer could be the government, or could be just a regular Joe like we are, but nobody pays the fair value. And if you don't get to fair valuation of sustainability, a lot of these concepts will never get to the main market, because there we fight for cost and not for sustainability as the main unique selling.
Yeah, the main sad truth. Agree. So Venkat, please.
I think let me start with echoing what you were saying, Casper, is that I think fundamentally we need to recognize the fact that the value chain is a buyer's market. And I'm quoting without, while being anonymous, is large manufacturer, very large manufacturer based out of India. And he's been catering to brands out of US and Europe for a good 2-3 decades now. So very established relationship, great credentials, has been doing a fair amount of work in investing in sustainability initiatives. I'm not saying it's done enough or whatever, but there's a very clear intent followed through with action as well. Their quote is this: the moment you go back to the brand, the customer, who's going to pay for the T-shirt or the denims or whatever it is, and you say, hey, I'm doing this, but I'm also not doing this for myself in terms of whether it is, making sure that all my facilities, manufacturing facilities, are covered by solar, or I'm converting into biomass, or I'm doing something else, and helping my upstream suppliers also adopt sustainability initiatives, and hence my cost is going to go up by 0.5 cent or whatever. The brand's response is, and I'm not kidding you, the brand's response is, fair enough, but we do have a couple of other manufacturers willing to do it at the same cost. It's a buyer's market, right? That's number one. I think number two, which probably goes back into the question, Janeda, that you were asking, Arab, as well as 50% of the value chain is SMEs and MSMEs. So even if you look at it from a policy point of view in terms, or even in terms of establishing, and I'll quote a very specific example on standards, right? There's a manufacturer, a very large manufacturer again, who's gone back and said to their suppliers, saying, hey, we need you to be GRI certified. Most of these SMEs have absolutely no clue what to do with it. They don't even know where to start. They don't know what it entails. They don't know how to go through the process. They don't have the capacity and the capability. On the aspect of material innovations per se, absolutely very relevant. But let me draw a very quick comparison with the automobile industry. Material innovation has been at the center of the performance and cost of a car. And that's true for the textiles and apparel industry as well. 2 years back, 2019 and 20, we actually did an exercise of mapping all innovations possibly there across the entire value chain from start to end, right? All the way from raw material, input material, to the processing of the end of life material. The key learning for us was that the entire value chain is designed for a cotton economy. Most of the SMEs, most of the suppliers, the infrastructure, the capex that is there that they've invested in has been built for a cotton economy. So if the industry needs to shift and start adopting or testing the viability of a new material compared to what they're currently using or have been using for a good few decades, there's a significant investment needs to come in, right? Which means that, for us as an ecosystem builder or enabler, and this is a conversation that we've had with Rene and his team as well, and some of the work that we've done through the UNIDO's Facility for Low Carbon Technology Deployment. We ran a program called ACE, which is Accelerating Circular Economy, with the pure intent of establishing the business case. Because for a brand or a manufacturer to adopt any solution at scale or a new alternative, whatever that might be, and however good it might look on paper, unfortunately, the sustainability managers or the business leads need to go back to the board and saying, for the current business and the way we are running and the way the materials that we're using, the processes that we are using, the suppliers that we're using, the procurement practices that we are using or putting into practice, what is that economic value that's going to come from it? Right? So Casper, you were talking about, Nasper, you were talking about the sustainability value, right? So in the last 9 months, we've actually gone back to the point of saying, we've used some of the innovations from what Rene's team has been doing in India from the Facility for Low Carbon Technology Deployment, 2 innovations specifically there on energy efficiency or water efficiency for that matter. Today, we've got over a period of 9 months, we've established a business case by going back to these brands and manufacturers saying, if you adopt a solution, here is the not just the environmental value in terms of mitigating or avoiding emissions, or in terms of saving the amount of water that is used or saving the amount of energy that is used, but here is the economic value that you can foresee. And we were able to do that only by bringing in multi-stakeholders to be part of the same pilot, because the robustness of a business case or the information that helps move not just one brand or one manufacturer, but more of them, is by going to a brand and saying, hey, can I get more of your manufacturers into the same demonstration pilot? Or we can go back to a manufacturer and saying, you work with a cohort of brands. Can you help us identify or bring 2 or 3 of those brands who can come and test and validate one of these solutions? And a testament to that, and the reason I'm sharing this is because I think all of us could probably use some of the encouraging results that we've been getting, is that in the last 9 months from these demonstration pilots, we've actually gotten 5 or 6 innovators today who are on the verge of landing large-scale commercial contracts of anywhere between 3 to 7 years with these brands and manufacturers. And I'm talking large global multinational brands, manufacturers out of Europe and US as well. The key point that I want to leave with is this. When we think of enabling factors, 2 things that we're hearing from the ground from specifically the MSMEs or the SMEs, even if you want the brand to adopt because they're the ones who are driving the adoption or the ease of making the ease of adoption happen on the ground for their supply chain partners upstream, is this. They're looking for access to capital. They are looking for access to low cost capital because most of these SMEs do not even have the credit history to go and knock on the doors of capital providers to say, hey, here is where my intent of switching to a sustainable circular economy solution or alternative is, but here is where I need capital, not just for CapEx, but people on the ground. And we were, Mark and I were there in Bangladesh a couple of months back. We're saying, these guys are saying we need help in capital that can also help the softer issues of capability building and capacity building. I think whether we're talking about conventional textiles or technical textiles, the commonality of it is that if it's a buyer's market and most of the value chain is SMEs or MSMEs, in fact, they need a significant amount of support and an enabling environment all the way from policy to preferential policies or regulations, or in terms of access, enabled access and accelerated access to capital, because that's what is going to be the game changer. It won't happen from one large brand saying yes and getting 1 or 2 of their large manufacturers to switch. Bulk of the value chain is the MSMEs who need a holding hand. And I'll take a pause here. Sorry, there's a lot
thank
of
you,
reflections.
Venkat. I think you put interesting conundrum question to Arab, which I'm going to slightly rephrase, but also gave him a bit of a lead to how to answer it. But I'm sure, Arab, you have a similar experiences. So It seems like from a few exchanges now, including the intervention, of course, of Casper and Venkat and also Renee about where innovations are happening and what kind of investment it needs, etc., etc. It seems like technical textile value chain is dominated by, at the moment, by few large players. So would they be brands or would they be non-branded, large sort of people at the first tier of the supply chain. At the same time, thousands of MSMEs which are part of this chain. So the question to you is then how these SMEs can be galvanized towards circular economy. So you can sort of reflect on what Venkat is now suggesting and other colleagues as well as offer your view on that. And perhaps the second sub-questions of that, how do we see it not only from the perspective of sort of providing MSMEs with all of this sort of infrastructure for investment, access to finance, etc., but also give MSME community an agency so that they are in a position to be heard somehow, or initiate conversation individually as a community through. Are there such forums? So where this agency can come from? So two sub-questions to you, please.
Thank you very much. Two sub-questions in addition to all the previous questions. Very briefly, your first question that was related to the EU and the EU policy. Permaport, the EU policy. In resource efficiency and sustainable consumption production, the EU has been driving the discourse around the world, and we have been following it. So if we're talking today about STP, it's, you can call it thanks or because of the EU policies. Not everybody has adopted the same way. Not everybody in the region, not every region is as advanced as the EU, but they are still all looking on how the EU is moving, and the EU is trying through its bilateral and multilateral policies, trying to see how they can effectively mainstream these notions and policies in other countries' policies, would it be circular economy and the textile and so on. So what the EU will be adopting in the next, I think, 2 years, because it's about 2024, will have an impact around the world, and in particular in Asia, because Asia is providing most of the textile in general, including the technical textile. And slowly it will drive this, because the middle class in Asia is imitating the lifestyle of the Europeans, and then it will be implemented there. Slowly we will get to there, not as quickly as we wish, but the EU will be driving it. And an element that I wish Professor Schwang could consider is in the way ISO is working and the standardization. Where is there a space there for what the EU is looking for, which is a digital product passport that will be a very clear label that through digitalization, we should be able to have this digital passport to follow on where the product's coming from, how it is manufactured, and so on and so forth. Is there a space for that? But this is a question eventually, if you have time, you can respond later. Coming to your elements, Zinaida, and I think Venkat has already answered a big part of it. First of all, if we want to move in the sector and promote sustainability, circularity, we definitely need first to see how we can disrupt existing system. The existing system that is dominated by the big brands and big companies, which is the same for normal fashion clothes, which is the same for the building sector, which is the same for the transport. You have in all of them big companies, big brands dominating the market, leading the market. If we want to get to sustainability, to circularity, we need to disrupt the system, and we need to give more responsibility, value, and visibility to other stakeholders who are in the shadow. And these are the ones who are in the supply chain, the so-called micro, small, and medium enterprises that are not visible. They are the elephant in the room. We all know about them, but we don't know how to deal with them. So when it comes to the SMEs, and Venkat raised an interesting point, if you go in the value chain, supply chain, and try to see how you can promote sustainability, and the big company, the brand, try to trickle it down to the small and medium enterprises and tell them, we want this, this, and this, but they don't know about it. Yes, they don't know about it. And that's where we need to disrupt the system. That's where first the government need to support innovation and value innovation through their procurement system and allow them to get to the market. But that's also where we need to enhance their, what I would call, the non-financial capacity. They have to understand how to have the right books with the right records in order to follow better what they are doing, what they are spending, their income, outcome, and so on. Not all of them have it in a clear manner. They need to become financially literate in order to see exactly what could be accessible to them in the financial sector. And at the same time, work with the financial sector to also educate them and help them to provide windows for small and medium enterprises. I know that Switch Asia is working on that with the Asian Development Bank. Others are doing it in other regions and so on. So it is not, it's a whole system. I think we have all been talking about the whole system, how to look at it. And in this specific context, working with the small and medium enterprises, we need to look at the system around them and not just one component. Shake it, disrupt it, but it cannot be business as usual. We cannot just improve a segment while keeping the rest business as usual. Otherwise, circularity will not work. So this is an extremely important element here. Now, we're talking how you raise an important question for Rene about the leverage point, but I want to take them, of course, in my question here. Would it come to fiber and recycling? The small and medium enterprises has proven that they can innovate in their local ecosystems and come with brilliant solutions that simply need to be visible, supported to get scaled up. Let me take the example of when Rene talked about the fiber issue, alternative fibers. I'm not here to promote seed, but we have cases. And there are drops in the ocean. I agree with that. But cases that demonstrated that it makes good social, environmental, and business sense to work with small and medium enterprises. Governments has not understood it yet. We have a company that is working on vegan leather. Rene referred to pineapple and others. This person are using mushrooms. And they are doing vegan leather through mushrooms. Others are doing it. They are using no harmful chemicals, and they are using 90% less of water. Now we say, where are we going? Why we cannot scale this up? Because the big brands are not ready for that. So we need to disrupt the system. Other thing that can apply very easily to the technical textile. We have one that is recycling all type of plastic, dirty, contaminated, whatever. It doesn't need to be cleaned before and so on. And he's making tiles for homes that are much more solid than the normal ones we do. You can hardly break them. and it's just done out of plastic. And he received awards from around the world after we recognize him. We have many like that, and their application can go to the various sectors in which we are working. Now, the geotextile is something that have to be looked at differently from the linen one, the medical one, and the sport one. I want to make this distinction here that is important. In the sport one, there has been leading by example for a very simple reason. They are visible. They are in the spotlight. They are in the media. So they cannot afford to make big mistakes. Fine. Let them lead by example and learn from there. The geotextile are for long life. They are here for 30, 40 years and so on. So they have to be solid from the beginning. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You can hardly even look at recycling of them because they have done such a long life out of there, but still. But there are two sectors where we can improve much further: the design and recycling, linen and the medical system. We all have curtains, bedclothes, bedding, cotton, carpets, and so on. The system there can be much further improved in terms of first designing, thinking about recycling, remanufacturing, upcycling, and so on. We don't think much about it. The curtain that we have all in our apartments can become cloth, can become something else, can become something more solid. They can work around on that. So it's something extremely important that we need to consider. And the most sensitive one is, of course, the medical. But in the medical, there are different elements. We always talk about the mask because of COVID, but there are so many other things. And even on the mask, some small enterprises have been very innovative in how we can reuse them in different sectors, in pavement, in roads, and so on, in order to move further. Now, how can we galvanize the small and medium enterprises? First, just support them. Small and medium enterprises, by principle, they are innovative because they need to survive in their ecosystem. So they innovate. A small and medium enterprise that does not innovate will be dominated and eaten in the supply chain, and it will disappear when they will ask them, we need the same product, you innovate, and so on. This is no. So they need to innovate. But once they have innovated, they need to get a support. But it's not such a dramatic support. We make too many fuss out of it. A small and medium enterprises need a very small amount and a tailored support to move to next step. We complicated it so much that we say, no, we cannot work with them. And we have to think differently. Small and medium enterprises need to be, I call it in my term, to be accompanied to next step. They are well educated. They know what they want. It's a family business. They want to survive. They just need to be accompanied to go to next step. Next step to make better their business. Next step to have a better business model. Next step to see how to address a bank and how to move with them and so on. But of course, once we have a mass of those enterprises, the policy framework need to be well aware about it and provide them with the support so that they cannot be killed immediately by the big brands and have them access to the market. It doesn't mean that they have to be dissociated from the brands, but they can be associated in a better terms because they will become not 1 and 1 plus 1, but they will become a group, a conglomerate of small and medium enterprises that can be very powerful, and that the intermediaries and the government can help with that if they are really serious about the sustainability processes. An agency for SMEs. You know, they need to be, how we say, induced to get more associated, to work more with each other, because the system, the brands want them to be one-to-one, separated, and then they can dominate them more. There is a way where we have to curate collaboration among the small and medium enterprises, curate collaboration with the business association, curate collaboration with others, so that those small and medium enterprises stop being in the shadow, come to the center of the discourse when you talk about circular economy. It's not a big company that does circular economy. It's based on what the small and medium enterprises does, because they are working in the ecosystem. A brand company is not working in the local ecosystem. They are in offices and they're dictating and they're in computer and doing things. The one doing the work are on the ground, small and medium enterprises. So circularity is local, is in the local ecosystem, and that's only where it can happen. So I maybe have taken, and that's why, if you allow me to say just a word, that's why we are now promoting and working on what we call a coalition for innovation, circularity, and entrepreneurship. Basically to provide a catalyst for the different stakeholders to scale up the multi-stakeholder consultation and partnership process, and to give a voice to entrepreneurship, to make sure that people understand, as a late report from OECD said, no net zero without SMEs. I stop here.
Thank you very much, Arab. So I do know that we are running over time, but I don't want really to finish this conversation that abruptly. So what I suggest we do, we will say that those of us who are in a rush or facing another appointment or some pressure or avalanche, I would say, of other duties may leave now. We thank you all for great participation and all our panelists for a wonderful contribution, noting that it is certainly a conversation which we need to continue. So we need to find a format, appropriate format for that. So it's certainly not at this stage a matter of very large and broad, sort of in terms of number of participants conversation, but maybe it needs to be a series of technical engagements so that we will find the leveraging points to act collectively on the ideas which we are sharing now, or make them find a way to somehow demystify. This is what I hear from all of the conversations, this the issue of empowerment in this area, issue of enabling of those bigger and smaller innovators through collaborative processes. So we need to think about these practical steps which we can collectively and without much burden for respective organizations to undertake. So that's for sure the next set of steps. And our research, which is also informed by your information now during this exchange, is going to be reflected in the technical report, which is going to be available very soon on our website, but we can also inform all of you once it's out. But after saying a big thank you to everybody, and those of you who want to leave may want to do so, I would like still to invite people who are staying online to have a little bit after the webinar time to perhaps reflect on some points which were so profoundly shared by a number of speakers as well. So for those of you who need to leave, big thank you and goodbye. And for those of you who are still with us and don't want to leave, please, the floor is yours. Raise your hand. And Sandrosh, would you like to say some sort of formal part of last formal words before people who need to leave? And we will stay in a smaller group which wants to stay for a little while, for some 10, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Zinaida. I think you covered all. I just want to echo your message again. For those who logged in, to this webinar today, I hope you have learned, something new. although this is not a kind of a conversation that we can discuss and get concluded within 2 hours. It's a continuing discussion, as you can say from the conversation. And so again, thanks very much for joining us today. And for those of you who I know that you are very passionate about this topic. If you would like to stay on, you are welcome to stay on, and we'll continue discussion. And for those of you, again, if you have additional resources that may be useful, for us to sort of finalize this policy paper, please feel free to leave links or any hint, to the document, and so we can get to the resources after this. All right, thank you very much.
So, and from this we have our after webinar small exchange. So I don't think that Renee, who was frequently referred, is still with us. But Venkat, you can also refer to your collaboration with UNIDO, and I think that a few colleagues from UNIDO might still be with us. Mark is with us, and I think perhaps some others as well, because I also saw Zaki from Bangladesh has been with us earlier as well. So colleagues, please, any reactions? So just Val, put yourself on, unmute yourself, and let's have a conversation if you want. Yeah. So Venkat, I saw. Kim Lee, please go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Kim. I'm a co-founder and managing director of a circular economy consulting boutique. I actually has several years working in textile focus on dyeing. It actually in the same project with Casper, right, to implementing the technologies, the dye technology in Vietnam. And later on, I opened a consulting focus on circularity regarding several the interesting stakeholder we have in Vietnam, that there is a need of technical facilitation and collaboration to bring all stakeholders together, especially like leverage SME who play an initial role like waste collector and recycler, which is very informal in Vietnam. If in India there is some case of recycling cotton, then in Vietnam is a very like very initial. But anyway, like in the I just want to share in the past couple of years, after a lot of investment in terms of research and development, we've seen that a lot of fashion brands now coming back and they have an action plan in terms of what they want to develop in terms for very specific product, very to have the whole supply chain develop for recycled product, which is but then of course there's a lot to do to leverage the capability of in terms of how to handling feedstock, how to handling the quality, and as well as the stable of the production, that in order to fulfill the big brand. One of the things we often talking is, and as well, we often direct the circular community later on. It really focus, develop their concept and develop their product serving the niche and sustainable community. So a niche market, maybe it's not yet ready for big brand because they have to bow to the stability, and several SME, you can develop. However, to reach to the scale that you're able to meet, that SME able to meet the requirement of brand is actually quite a long way. And within the time, the order and the need to have the output of product to be out there is needed. So we're switching the strategy from working with big brand, but then working with a smaller brand, but they really willing to invest in innovation and the price, because as Casper said and everyone said that it's a it's not true price of what is the supply chain providing right now. So a part of our experience in terms of moving circular textile in Vietnam, there is further development in terms of synthetic fiber and testing for laminating material as well. And the effort, there is still the big gap between the understanding of what can be, like end-of-life handling, but then as well the upstream of how collaboration can be made between brand and other vendor in terms of product change, tech packaging of the product. As well, however, it's happened. We see that in several like big fashion brand that can really be made once the concept is made, the changing of the material and design is actually being accepted. So it's not as bad as a fashion brand not making a move. Yeah. So I actually have not much question. I see that like certainly I believe that we're moving the right direction. Regulation moving from more voluntary to more mandatory, which is, but I believe there is much more have to be done in the global south. There is several cases not happening at the global north. For example, the gate fee for recycler, which definitely make it less interesting for recycler to put investment in terms of recycling, so or having more better supportive financial mechanism for recycler and other waste player as well.
Kim, can I ask you, so you mentioned that there is existing interest from the more smaller brand. Do you mean those are national brands or they are regional brands? What kind of brands or we are talking about, which are more keen to invest in and sell products based on, let's say, secondary textile materials or more environmentally friendly materials? What kind of companies, what kind of brands are they?
If we're speaking like, despite a lot of big brands, there is a lot of other brands which belong to KOL or for celebrity, where they develop a merchandising product that they have, which honestly the margin of product already higher than other fast fashion or big brand. And as well, the season and the per order of them is actually smaller, with meeting SME capability and as well order size. So with fashion brand or big brand, would take a long time to actually developing, like repeating or bulk order for fashion brand, which is after product development and getting all approved. Not even saying on the waste, when using secondary material, it takes time to go a lot of tester to ensure the non-hazardous and separation, non-hazardous and toxicology being made. And then after product, of course, going through compliancy, and often SME meeting quite a lot challenge in terms of compliancy and whole cost for developing product and testing new material. However, with small fashion brand with pretty niche, where the case is KOL brand, and then other celebrity is already happened, which is smaller size, quicker, and as well basically the order and different development sprint is smaller as well, which allow innovation, scale, and speed up quicker.
Okay, great. And colleagues, actually, I have one question to all of you, or all of us. I do remember, Casper, are you still with us? In our previous conversation, because this is the very good. This is a second conversation, and I just wanted to bring some points you made from the previous ones and related, Arab, to some of your points now, where the actual leveraging points towards circularity are coming from for different product applications, right? So Casper has been saying that for those materials where visibility is not there outside of sort of fashion and fashion or home textile market, where it is obvious pressure from the side of the consumers anticipated at least. The great leverage points is probably the whole resource efficiency during the production, because it is clearly linked to the economic dimension or sort of regulatory dimension in terms of waste production or waste minimization. But would you say that there is somehow a risk there if circularity and SCP is becoming strong, and say resource efficiency is becoming the driver, and resource efficiency is being sort of applied across the supply chain, and some of the MSMEs along the supply chain becomes really much quicker, more efficient than others, which are moving into this efficiency game much slower, would be kind of falling off the roadway much quicker. So if there is a, let's say, technology push downstream of the SMEs, and some of them are becoming much stronger, and stitching of the supply chain is happening much faster under all of those. So adaptability capacity of other MSMEs is just not that quick, and they are dying off much quicker than before. So the slack time is shortening. So did you ever think about that, and or is it something which is in a sense unavoidable, and something else needs to be, or some other markets locally is the only fate for those MSMEs, or almost informal market at the dramatic sort of option for those which are not catching up, this game of efficiency which is strengthening? Venkat, Arab, what do you think?
So the question was for Casper, but I can come in quickly.
For both of you,
Okay.
And for Casper and for Venkat. So what happens with the speeding up of the resource efficiency game for those which don't have a quick chance to adapt? Is elimination of them the only option, or otherwise, what are the scenarios for such a development?
I mean, if we work on a business as usual scenario, they either disappear or they find opportunities to reconvert on something else. But the problem, what we should look for and anticipate is that we cannot go on with the business as usual scenario. And that's why a government and other public institution need to prepare the ground to ensure that the small and medium enterprises can be regularly informed, education improved, upscaling their knowledge and so on, because the market is moving very quickly. It applies to digitalization or to new technologies and so on.
Exactly.
So obviously, if you have on a big brand that is now innovating, want to do things quickly and want to apply a certain technology, many of the small and medium enterprises would be taken by surprise, and then they will disappear, and they will give advantage to the one who will be doing it. So that's why, unlike a big company that has a forecasting office that have 10 people thinking about the future and so on, the small and medium enterprises most of the time live on a day-to-day purposes. But they should know that there is somewhere there in the country an institution, a public one, that can provide them with the information, upscale their knowledge, train the trainers and so on. And for me, this is the responsibility of the government, and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry for the small and medium enterprises. Otherwise, yes, either they disappear, which is happening a lot, or they have the intelligence to get reconverted in something else.
Okay, all right. So,
yeah, let me add something to that. I think you're right. If SMEs are left on their own devices, most of them will basically die off because of a lack of business. But we have to look at where do changes in the industry come from, right? So the textile industry is if you talk about innovation, it's supplier dominated, right? The innovations that we implement are often coming out of different industries, are pushed into the supply chains and then adopted. But a lot of the innovations, and we are one of them, but there are many others, are often impact technology providers that are startups. They come with something brand new. They really tackle a problem. But in a free market, cost is a big driver. So if you want to change the adoption of, let's say, impact technologies across the supply chain, not only on upstream technologies, but also downstream technologies, there need to be a balance. And of course, governments cannot have preferentials over certain technologies or certain companies. But what you need to have is a level playing field where we set ourselves up that the industry picks the right technologies to move with in a technology framework with peripheral financing for SMEs to survive and keep developing, but also for the industry to change and adopt. And that's again the cost factor to adopt that new technologies are not often driving costs down, certainly not if you talk about sustainability, and that people start paying fair prices. And SMEs in the end are the driving force behind a lot of changes in the industry. But if you not properly support them, and if you leave the market on their own devices, they will always go for the low cost. And impact technologies will never make their way into the supply chain because they're just too expensive. For SMEs, they're unaffordable in terms of CapEx. For large brands, they're not willing to adopt the true cost of innovation and sustainability. So they accept maybe 5 to 15% increase on FOB prices, but the true value is probably 40, 50% or even more. And they're not willing to absorb it. So you need to have some sort of level playing field where all factors come in: policy, financing, and of course an ecosystem where SMEs can survive long enough to actually get that technology moved forward. But history will tell you that in most cases, new technologies will not be adopted as quick as we want them, even though they really tackle a problem. But yeah, that's inherent to a free market. And I think if you talk about the Commission, the European Commission, you can set the rules in a way that legislation pushes for real radical change. But on top of that, there needs to be a change in behavior of the orchestrators in the supply chain, often brands or end users, to actually change and adopt to a system where people pay for a fair value of innovation and sustainability.
Very good. Can I ask, Katrin, are you with us? Are you listening, or you joined a little too late to catch up the trend of this conversation? Katrin?
I have been listening in for the last kind of end bit of the discussion.
Very good. So in this case, can I just ask you maybe to come in and share a few thoughts about the last bit of a conversation, particularly about support for, conversations which are going on, for example, within ADB or within the development community in general about area of textile innovation, a role of MSMEs there. So where those upcoming support trends coming from for creating of this level playing field?
So I think technical textiles has been a little bit hidden. So I think that's the reason for focusing on it and bringing it together. And I think we've identified that it's challenging because it cuts across lots of different sectors, but then potentially that also offers us an opportunity. I don't know if we look at it in combination with other areas as well. I think there is a growing realization about the role of SMEs and how we address that. I would say, being quite candid, we don't have we've got lots of different initiatives and not necessarily a kind of joined up approach. And so I think I think there's still working out what's that combination of the public policy, public procurement potentially, and then the then the kind of private sector support that potentially matches that, so that you're doing lots of different pieces of a jigsaw in a more joined up way. And that's the opportunity that organizations that fund both public and private have, is that potential to take a slightly more joined up approach. But I think, I think we're still at the beginning of that conversation.
And Catherine, when you mentioned that complexity of the textile has been a bit of a pitfall for moving into this area quickly, and then you mentioned that you are looking at ADB is looking at it in combination with some of the applications within technical textile area are being looked at, maybe in combination with some other potential sectors. You mean something like plastic, or what would be the combinations which are now emerging as potentially potent for sort of moving this whole discussion or action forward?
So I think, plastics is a big focus, but I think also technical textiles that are used in the construction industry, because that's kind of got a bigger footprint and a bigger portfolio than perhaps perhaps in the sports, perhaps some of the different sectors are less visible for the kinds of projects that we make.
So it would be, in a sense, building textile and in the building sector. So that would be the package which would be in principle.
I think it's just looking where there are synergies, basically. So I think it's looking for different entry points based on where you think there's going to be traction. But I think I was trying to look and see who was attending today, but I think at the moment, among a lot of people in ADB, technical textiles will be seen as something that's a little bit niche, but then being able to kind of say, okay, I can see this links to what I'm doing at this entry point, allows for it to be taken forward in combination.
No, in this sense, it would be nice to gather their experiences in case they were able to attend, or if they perhaps see some of the clips out of our conversation, because colleagues, we are recording this and for internal purposes, so it would be possible to revisit the whole flow, so that we can collectively pull something together which would push us towards the right direction. Venkat, please.
I think I just want to go back to what Arab was saying. I think your original question as well, Zeneda, which is how do we create that enabling environment or that support ecosystem for the SMEs, right? I think it's one of the silver linings from the COVID pandemic is that now, we started 2020 with brands and manufacturers being very optimistic about saying we've got a decade to think things through and kind of change the way we do business. And suddenly they left with only less than 7 years, or just about 7 years, right? They've lost 2 years. But the silver lining is that in the last 9 months, I've actually had calls directly from brands with saying, look, we don't want to just talk about, our existing net zero goals or any form thereof. They've largely been scope 1 centric, because we've not even considered scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. We've not even considered what our supply chain is contributing to. And suddenly we've got brands who are saying, hey, don't just help me, but can you also help my supply chain in becoming net zero or achieving or adopting circular economy? So we've actually put together a construct for decarbonization of the value chain across the global south, starting with South Asia, India, Bangladesh to start with. We were saying a core part of that whole decarbonization pathway is creating an ecosystem where there's a significant investment that goes into supporting and building capabilities amongst the SMEs. Because we recognize the fact that today, yes, compared to, let's say, 3 years back before just before the pandemic started, we've now gotten more brands and large manufacturers who have expressed intent, and I've also started putting a goal and a timeline with it. And that's a significant shift, because the moment you commit yourself to a goal, a number, and a timeline, the clock has already started ticking, at least in their heads. The clock has started ticking for the industry a long time back. But for the organization, the clock starts ticking the moment you put a number and a timeline associated with it. I think what we need to do is balance out what the policy actors can do and what the industry can do, right? So a big part of the decarbonization pathway, and I think, Catherine, this is, I'm going back to my conversation with the ADB team in the Bangladesh mission. We're saying, let's get a buy-in from the government. In the case of Bangladesh, for example, we know that they are in the transition phase from a low-income country to a middle-income country. We know the RMG sector contributes to more than 85% of their export earnings. So it's an economy which is primed for developmental challenges, right? As someone referred to very interestingly, saying if you consider Milan as the fashion capital, then Bangladesh is the developmental capital of the world, right? Which means that you need to get a buy-in from both the government and the industry. And interestingly enough, in the case of Bangladesh, and I think that's also largely more or less true for a lot of the global South economies in South Asia, Africa, and Southeast Asia also, is that the moment you get a buy-in from the government, and the government knows that they need to move from a sector that's been built around low cost and classic products like, cotton t-shirts and denims, but they want to now suddenly evolve. In spite of them being the second largest manufacturing hub, they need to now evolve to creating value-added products and play a larger role in the global value chains. But the only way they can do that is by shifting the whole construct away from cost arbitrage and low-cost labor construct of the industry to a point where they've adopted sustainability in a way that it makes unit economic sense for the SMEs. Think of a manufacturing unit which manufactures a 10 euro t-shirt. On an average across the global South, a manufacturing unit's operating cost, 15 to 25% of our manufacturing units cost is energy. If you're able to bring down that savings or deliver a savings of 15 to 20% on the base cost of 10 euros, you suddenly added 2 euros back into the pocket of the SMEs, and that's quite significant.
Exactly.
Extremely significant.
Exactly.
And like Arab was saying, I think we just need to demystify, because it doesn't take billions and billions, because these guys have very simple needs and very simple asks, which can be addressed. And all it takes is a few people to come together and say, the only way to de-risk it, we're saying, is how do you share risks? If it's difficult for one brand or manufacturer to test and validate a solution, because there's a risk involved with changing completely overnight the way they do business, or the materials they use or solutions they use, can we get or mobilize 3 brands to share the risk of testing and mobilizing capital that will help them validate a solution? And I think that's essentially what we're trying to do. We're trying to work with both the public sector and the private sector players in a way that we're able to try and establish a common ground where we're saying, look, the role of the policy is not to mandate. I was working with the, just a quick example, because that actually is very ripe in my mind even yet. 2014 and 2015, I was advising the city of Amsterdam on a project. And as part of the project, working with Teslas of the world and the retail chains, when they were looking to eliminate single-use plastic from across the retail value chain, a key learning that we got from recorded human history is that when you design something which is either both a disincentive or an incentive, it cannot sustain all by itself, because you want adoption to happen in a way that the economy and the framework can be self-sustaining. So policy needs to be moved away from a mandatory construct to how do we frame it in a way that it becomes easy for people to adopt solutions, or it needs to be a balance of both. And at the same time, how do we work with the capital providers, everyone from philanthropic capital providers who provide grants, and to us now started to see a lot of returnable grant constructs that are happening. We're working on a couple of projects where we're trying to come up with blended capital instruments working with DFIs, working with bilaterals, working with multilaterals. But essentially what we're trying to do is get a consortium of players together who understand that we need to work towards a common goal. But I think from an operational cadence, for some reason, either as the brands or manufacturers themselves that we're trying to solve the problems for, or all of us on this who are representing different aspects of direct or indirect participation in the value chain, we need to figure out a way that it makes it easy for people to join in and participate rather than making it exclusive. And SMEs have been holding up the economies across the world. So to imagine a construct saying they will naturally fall out because they've not adopted is actually not a strong sentiment for economies, because they've been held up on SMEs for the longest time across industries, across sectors. So I think it's imperative for us that we design and construct programs with intent in a way that we can give them that level playing field. As Casper was saying, I think it's about level playing field, because once you have a level playing field and somebody decides to not participate, then that's the choice that the organization is making to not adopt and stay relevant in the future. But until then, I think all of us here in the different roles that we're playing, we owe it to the ecosystem to make sure that we are able to mobilize and bring together partners who are working towards the same end goal and make things happen.
No, definitely. And Venkat, I think that what you are saying and other colleagues are adding to that gives us an idea for potentially a regional project to pilot this kind of constellations with a new policy support component stage starting from the next year. So that's actually quite useful, this exchange. And may I at this stage acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency Lina Ning. She's representing Minister of the Environment of Cambodia. Let me see if she's with us and listening. Let me see, or any of your colleagues. Your Excellency Lina, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, very good. So can I ask you, this discussion, does it resonate? Yeah, does it resonate well with activities which we have in Cambodia?
Okay, yes, actually that I'm a little bit that to join the meeting, but I have listened to all because we have another meeting, parallel meeting together. But I'm very happy that I listened to all the speaker. Is very informative information related with moving to circular economy into the private sector or SME. This is the big activity or action plan that Cambodia now are seeking and moving our policy and strategy into the partnership. So recently that Cambodia already have circular economy, and we already launched last year, and some action plan already implemented with various sector or ministry, and also that we are moving to some private sector. Like yesterday we having the grand opening for be eco-friendly with like small businesses, and another one that last week we just launched SCP, our SCP, like you may know that Zenada, because by supporting from UNEP with Asia, we having SCP roadmap, and last week we already launched that roadmap, and there are some commitment that from other development partner and private sector that found that it's very important one that for the SCP, especially we want to move SCP into the medium enterprise or SME. So Ministry of science and technology already committed to engage, integrate this concept into the main activity, and that I think that is a good new one. And I used to start with our development partner to be ensure that how we move our work very practically in the real practice. I think that I don't want to keep everything on the table. I just want to move all the policy and strategy into the real practice. So this is I used to talk with our partner, especially. Yeah, I heard from Arab related with that one, and we commit to work with that one as well. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. So I wanted you to speak because the fact that you are staying until the end and interested in this conversation, and the fact that you are already doing quite a lot, I think that Cambodia would be one of the countries for us to sort of to keep in mind if we are to sort of to extend larger collaboration across Asia and now, well, from the next period, Pacific. I think, colleagues, that people started to work with their hands, or rather with their mouse clicks, leaving for some other commitments. So again, thank you very much. So I don't know if anybody would like to stay longer, so we could in principle allow it to happen for you to converse among yourselves. From my side, I also would need, unfortunately, to sign off very soon. But again, from our side, we promise to document the pearls of wisdom which were shared now. I think that exchange, particularly for the last half an hour, 40 minutes, has been extremely practical for us to come up with a sensible way of sharing what works, at least to start with this, and see how new collaborations could be also facilitated from our side, as well as from potentially other DGs. So with this, I would like again to thank you all, those most dedicated and passionate ones, and again allow you to stay and talk in case you really desire to do so. Thank you very much from my side, and goodbye. And thank you very much, of course, Catherine, to you, to be a very dedicated partner. We are hoping to induce interest in our respective organizations, or keep it, sustain, and again come up with something practical and impactful. Thank you very much to all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having us, Zaneta and Saint Roj.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Good to see you,
and
Mark.
good to see you, Mark. So see you. Bye-bye. Thank you.